Welcome to the Meat Medic podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Suresh Khirwadkar. In today's episode, I'm interviewing Bradley Marshall. Now, I apologize. Unfortunately, I screwed up the recording a little bit on my camera and it's really all out of focus and my video wasn't that usable. So what I've done is rather than get Bradley to re-record the whole thing, I've shrunk it down and done a picture-in-picture. It's not ideal, but I think it's passable. So, hope you guys enjoy this episode and thank you for watching. Well, thank you, Bradley, for coming on my podcast today. I'm joined by Bradley Marshall, who has a great carnivore success story that he wants to share with everyone. So, maybe Bradley, if you could perhaps introduce yourself to people that don't know you and give us your story.
For sure. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Dr. Suresh. As I was saying before we started recording, it's an absolute privilege to have doctors like you out there in the world that are pushing forward the narrative that meat is good for you and going against the traditional grain where so many doctors, unfortunately, are criticizing it and without myopically criticizing it. And even though there's a wealth of evidence there that proves that it's infinitely good for you, as you can clearly see it has done with my condition. So basically, I've always had eczema my whole life. I was born with eczema. My mum says the moment I was born, I was covered in rashes.
Wow.
Unfortunately. And I've always noticed the difference. And quickly in high school, kids around me would be playing and some older kids would come up and say, "What's wrong with your face? It's just covered in rashes." And so quickly I always felt different. There was a period of between around 18 to 23 where it just subsided to a point where I was able to live my life and I was really happy. But at 23 to now I'm 26, it was only 3 years, but it could have been indefinite. It could have gone on forever, until I died, had I not discovered this carnivore diet. And for that period of 3 years, I was just in this excruciating purgatory of just pain, and I wasn't able to leave my bed. I had to quit my job. I'm a piano teacher as well as a maths teacher, so teaching piano, I couldn't reach the octave, which is like 8 notes. It's pretty easy to reach, but I couldn't because my fingers were so destroyed and gnarled with the eczema, and it was so hard to teach. And the kids were saying to me, "Oh, what's wrong with your hands? And if I practice the piano that much, will my fingers end up looking like that?" And it was just embarrassing. And I felt really I felt insecure, but insecurity was the least of my worries because really it was debilitating pain 24/7 and it would get worse at night. So I knew that this couldn't be the answer. I couldn't just live like this for the rest of my life. And I mean, traditional doctors just prescribe steroid creams and antibiotics. And it's just a cycle of curing yourself transiently. And then once you get off the medication, it would always get worse. And so that's what I found. So I just felt like I got to the point where I was avoiding going to the hospital at one point about a year ago. And I remember saying to my mum was like, "You need to go to the hospital because you're weeping so much and your blood could be just," it turned out my blood had turned septic, but it got to the point where I felt like, yeah, this is really bad. I need to go in. So because I just didn't want to go in because I knew what they'd do. They'd put me on steroids and they'd put me on antibiotics and it'd be the same thing. And I'd be great for 2 weeks, but then I'd be devastated again after that 2 weeks. So I went in and the doctor was like, "Lucky you came in because if you didn't, I would have given you probably a week and you would have died." That's how severe it was. So I just said, yeah, I need to do something about this. Yeah. I didn't trust the steroids. I already was familiar with topical steroid withdrawal and so I stopped all medication. I stopped everything from Alidel to steroids to antibiotics to even QV cream. And I came across someone was in the gym and he saw my eczema and he said, "I had eczema too. And I started this carnivore diet and I really recommend you should try it." So I just assumed that maybe he had mild eczema because mine was really severe. So you know what? I'm just going to try it anyway, see what happens. So that day I started it. And while I started it, I was already aware of people like Michaela Peterson and Jordan
Mm.
Peterson, and I knew about Jordan Peterson, and I heard about his daughter being on the carnivore diet, and him
Yep.
as well. So yeah, it just came to me that I saw her story. She cured herself of her arthritis and her psoriasis, and I just said to myself, yeah, I have to try this.
Mm.
Um, so it took me about 7 weeks into it, and then I could start to sleep again, and my skin was starting to cure. And now I've been on it about 8 months, and my life is back. I'm able to work again.
Mm.
I can move. I can work out. Like it's literally like
Wow.
I've returned from almost the brink of death, and now I'm a young person again.
Wow. I mean, what a what a powerful story. I mean, that's just incredible, isn't it? So you got into carnivore because someone at the gym saw your skin and said,
Yeah.
look, I've tried this thing. Do you want to try it? What did that sound like to you? First of all, this person coming up to you and saying, "Hey, try this meat only diet." Like, what was your kind of first impression of that?
My first impression was, I wasn't skeptical because I was very open minded to a lot of things. Um, but the first thing I was worried about constipation. I was worried about colon cancer. I was worried about atherosclerosis. All of these things were on my mind. So I started off not just going straight to meat. I started off having some keto fruit in the diet. So I had like
Hmm.
avocado, I had coconut, I had, yes, and honey. So when I had cravings, I just had honey. So that lasted me about 3 to 4 weeks. And when that when I felt like that was still causing me a bit of itchiness, I cut that and then went full lion diet. So that's nothing but
Right.
meat, like
Mm.
just cow and lamb and salt and water, and that's
Yeah.
it. And that's really when it accelerated.
So,
But on top
mm,
of this, I'm also doing cold water therapy, and I'm
right.
also doing using the sauna all the time because I really feel that it works in conjunction with that plus exercising. The moment I drop off like exercising and cold water therapy and the diet, that's when my eczema really starts returning. So it's the whole combination of all of those things holistically.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that some people do forget sometimes. Carnivore diet, it's not a magic cure for everything. You still need to be looking after yourselves in other ways, but it certainly sounds like you have had amazing success with the carnivore diet. You mentioned keto there and doing some keto, vegetables, keto fruits, and so on for the fats like
Mhm.
avocado. Were you doing keto for a while then, and then before you went into carnivore?
When I say keto, like I wasn't having cheese, I wasn't having dairy, I wasn't having fish. Like I was only doing basically strict lion diet plus the addition of avocado and coconut and honey, and that's it.
But then when you took those out, you saw it accelerate.
Yeah, so that I probably stayed on that for about 5 to 7 weeks, and I was it was already healing by that stage. But then I just like when you're on that level of that level of health, like the most subtle changes in your body you can really notice. So back when I was really just saturated with illness, like I really couldn't tell the small differences. But eliminating avocado to from having it to eliminating, I could really tell the difference. Like, and so that's why I did it. But at this point in time as well, I'm also aware that avocado has magnesium, and there is possibly electrolytes that I'm missing from like magnesium, calcium, potassium, and so I occasionally still reintroduce avocado as I prefer to have those fruits than
Mm.
supplementing. And I occasionally try sashimi now, which is salmon, raw salmon, cooked or raw, because Michaela Peterson actually reached out to her at one point because I was worried about
Mm.
electrolytes, and she was humble enough to answer
Okay.
me, and she said, "Yeah, she can take sashimi," so she recommended I try it,
Mm.
and it does flare me a little bit, but not to the point where I really flare
Mm.
up.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and certainly, I mean, I would agree with you. Whole food is really always better than supplements and artificial products. If we can help it at all. Electrolytes is one of those things where it can be a little bit divisive. I think in the carnivore community, whether you really need
Yeah.
them or not. Did you feel that you needed some extra electrolyte support on this diet?
Well, I was just a tiny bit concerned because I noticed. Well, first of all, I did a blood test because I wanted to. After 6 months, I did a blood test and I wanted to see what was going to happen. So obviously, my LDL levels were higher than normal. It turned out to be like I think 4.8, I think, millimole per
Hmm.
liter, um, which is higher than normal, obviously. But the thing that concerned me was my ALT levels and AST levels were higher. But I also have a condition called G6PD, which is
Okay,
like a glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase. And I had high AST and ALT levels when I was 19 on a standard diet. So I think it's the same. It's in fact, my AST levels dropped, my ALT levels went higher, but at the same time, I'm always working out. So I understand that if you're working out, your ALT levels go up because ALT is also released from your
can do
muscles.
absolutely, and certainly. Did you lose any
Yeah.
weight? Because that can sometimes spike your liver function as well.
Yeah. Like there's pictures of me before and now. Like everyone always comments how lean I look. They're like, "Wow, you got such a six pack and everything you can see." I'm like, "Yeah, that's the carnivore diet." So I think I was pretty much like 84 kilos when I was around 21, and I think I'm still 84 kilos. But the thing is, there's not much fat on my body. Like it's really just all muscle.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen your Instagram video that you sent me, your story, and you're certainly a little bit leaner than I am. I'm certainly getting there, but not quite to that level yet. But certainly getting there. I'm seeing changes myself with the carnivore diet.
That was actually older than how
Oh,
it is
okay.
now. Like there's some photos where it's really like pronounced. That's like the
Okay.
video you saw is I'm not actually lean there at all, to be honest, compared to now.
Oh
But
no.
that's the carnivore. I don't really work out abs as much
Yeah.
as some people I know. Like I'm not going hard.
Mm.
I just do it every now and then, and just because of the diet, it's just all the fat's
It's
gone.
amazing, isn't it? I mean, I say this to people, and they don't believe you, how much difference it can make. And I found myself, I've always been very heavily into eating meat. I used to do low carb and keto for a long time, but the
Mm,
differences that I see with my muscle mass that I'm gaining now, even with barely working out, I mean, like literally 5 minutes a day, it just blows keto out of the water. Like it's night and day, and I'm probably eating sometimes less meat than I was before, which is fascinating to
mm,
me. It's just taking out a lot of those other foods seems to just help so much, which is really interesting. So
mm. I was watching your podcast. I think episode 3. You were talking about
mm,
fasting. I also fast as well. So every morning, like I don't eat until around 2
mhm.
p.m. Purely because when you're just eating meat, sometimes you feel so full on the meat you just don't need to eat.
That's right. I mean, you said
So
there
yeah.
earlier, sorry, that you feel like you're a lot more in tune with your body now when since doing carnivore, and that's certainly something that a lot of people do find with this. How has that changed your day to day life in terms of what you eat, when you eat, and so on?
Well, with my routine, I try to avoid eating until 2 p.m. So I do all this like intellectual work, if you will, in the morning, like thinking, and then because I find when I eat, I become sluggish. So, like it's like when I'm fasting, my mind is really clear, and I know other people who fast talk about this. And so when I eat, I feel a bit sluggish, and then so yeah, in terms of how I feel, was your question like how I feel when I eat carnivore?
No, more
Like
so, you said you noticed that you're a lot more in tune with your hunger signals
yeah,
and so on.
yeah, I'm really in tune the moment I eat anything other than meat. For
Right.
example, just the other day, actually, I had minced ground beef, and of course, it is meat. But the thing is, I reacted to it. So I was wondering, why did I react to it? I looked it up online. What is added to ground beef to actually preserve it? What they put in it in Australia at least, is 500 milligrams of sulfur dioxide per pound of meat.
Didn't know that.
So that was what I was reacting to. You see, I know the second that there's something new that's introduced to my body that my body doesn't agree with, I know. Like, my body's so sensitive. Like, if I was just eating, like, now that I'm 7 months on the carnivore lion diet, like, I've been experimenting with new foods. So, like, the other day I just had plums that were organic, and I'm always going for organic because I don't want to mix up. I want to test the fruit itself. I don't want to mix it up with the pesticides or whatever that's been put in it. So, yeah, I just had a plum, and while I didn't have a severe reaction, like, it was still sore. My body was sore. Just like you were talking about in your episode 3, like, you notice when you introduce vegetables again, your body gets sore.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating because I think a lot of people do report the same thing, that our bodies become so much more. I don't think we become more sensitive to things necessarily. I think we become a lot more in tune with what foods do to us. Is my take on it. I think they're always doing that to us. It's just we didn't know because we're eating them all the time, or we're tired and sluggish all the time, so we don't notice the difference. But then when you take those out, you become a lot more in tune with how you feel. And it's so easy to see straight away. You eat something, oh no, I don't feel good. almost straight away, which was my experience. Sounds like, yours as well.
Yeah. Well, some people say, like, I know I've heard some people say, well, if you cut out food for that long, your microbiome is no longer used to those foods, and so it will take you time for if you don't eat those foods, part of the microbiome kind of perhaps disappears. Like, I haven't done enough research into it, but like the bacteria in there that's necessary for breaking down those certain foods are no longer there because you haven't been eating those foods, and so you have more of a reaction. That's what I've heard. So it's hard to discern between the two, whether it's actually you reacting to the food or whether you haven't eaten it in a while. But that's why I'm testing it. Like, every time I try a new food, I don't just try it once. I try it maybe like 3 times a few weeks apart.
Probably sensible, yeah. And that's a question that I get asked as well. Well, is it just that you're more in tune with your body, or is it that you've lost some protection against that food? You've changed your gut microbiome and so on. We know the gut microbiome changes and will adapt to or change depending on what you're eating. My question there really is, well, if these things are harmful, if we need to build a protection against them, should we be eating them?
That's what Saladino talks about.
Is my question. I don't necessarily have the answer to that, but it's an interesting question anyway. The gut microbiome is something that, I mean, we could do like 20 podcasts on that alone. I mean, it's so complicated, but
yeah. Well, he talks about hormesis and the benefit of eating vegetables, whether you actually need it or not. Like, the toxins that you get from it, forgive me if I'm wrong, but the oxalates, salicylates, polyphenols, you have those toxins. What's the risk versus the reward having these vegetables? And so he argues, like, when you do things like sauna and cold water therapy, which I'm actually doing all the time because I really found it works, you get the benefit from the vegetables without the toxins. So there really isn't a need to have vegetables, he argues, if you're also having these toxins, when you can have the same thing by doing exercise, cold water therapy, and sauna without the toxins.
Potentially, yeah. And that is the question, what is there a benefit? Is there a risk? And where does that balance lie? And it's a really interesting question. I'm not sure we necessarily have an answer to that. I think everyone's got to try it themselves, really, in a way. I just want to go back a little bit if I can. So you said that you really, almost from the day you were born, you had eczema.
It was bad. Like, it was always, my dad was saying to me, and I remember this as well, like, there would be 50-cent size pieces, which for viewers who are overseas, that's like the size of an avocado seed, around the body, all over my legs. Like, there was a point when I was in high school where my whole back was like literally like a pizza. Wow. It was just awful. And my shirt would be stuck to my skin, and I dread getting up in the morning, going to school, and everyone's like worrying about, how do I fit in, whatever. And I have to deal with that, plus just trying to move, and then get home, and then I'd take off the shirt and it would reopen the wound and
Oh,
everything would be weeping again and bleeding. It was just
gosh.
absolutely
Yeah.
terrible. I mean, even in the summer, like my friends would be like, "Why are you wearing pants?" And it's like, it's not just because I'm insecure and I don't want to wear shorts because you'll see all the bleeding mess, but it's just, oh, I don't know. It's mainly that, but it's like, to be honest, it would be much easier if I wore shorts. It's 100% that. But yeah, it's the whole thing of when you get home and you have to rip it off, and it's just an awful experience. But it
Mm.
got worse. It got so much worse in the last 3 years. Like, I learned to live with that experience. Like, I learned to manage it. In the last 3 years, it was just absolutely debilitating. Like, I couldn't even move anymore.
Yeah,
I
gosh.
was just in bed and I was thinking, wow, what, is this the end of my life? Like, am I gonna die like this? Or, like, I was projecting my mind into the future, like when my parents are gone and living by myself. Who's gonna help me? Like, I don't even know if I can find love like this. This is just ridiculous. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I just knew I had to do something, and I never gave up hope. I was always looking for solutions, and that's when like, before the carnivore diet, I was already doing a year worth of cold water therapy. Like, it's really cold in Melbourne. Pretty much right now it's summer, and it's like 12
Yeah,
degrees
gosh.
Celsius. It's cold in the water. Like, it feels like
Yeah.
winter.
It's like
Um,
35, I think, up
it's
here in Brisbane at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I went up there just recently and it's beautiful. But yeah, during the winter, I was diving into the freezing water because part of my mind was like, maybe the reason the people can't cure themselves of this eczema is because they're not willing to push themselves to the edge like I am. Like, I did a lot of research into these in Melbourne. They call themselves, what do they call themselves? The
Hmm.
icebergers. And so the people who just dive into the water
Oh,
every day,
okay,
and
yeah.
there's one person who had nerve damage in his
Mm.
legs and he couldn't walk properly. And every time he'd go into the water, the freezing water, he'd come out and his nerves would somehow reset themselves that he could walk perfectly well.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought to myself, so I was already searching for answers that were like not traditional, because I spent 20 years in the standard medicine, like, of the procedures they give you. I tried all the steroid creams, increasing in potency all the time, every
Mm.
year. I tried Eladel for my face, which is great. I tried UV treatment. I tried wrapping my skin in like honey and bananas and lettuce, and like I tried homeopathy and naturopathy, like every single thing I could find, and none of it worked. So I said, you know what, I'm going to try to take this into my own hands. I'm going to look for things that people don't really think about, like, what about cold water
Yeah.
therapy? So yeah, started that. I said, what about sauna? What about sweating out the toxins? So did that. There was even a crazy period in my life which people could just mock, but I really thought maybe it was something to do with the radiation of like the phones, and like maybe it was something to do with it dried out my skin or something. So I know Dr. McCullough talks about it, and a lot of people just think he's a quack, but a lot of people think Paul Saladino is a quack. So he sells these like EMF
Mm.
shielding around his bed. So I bought that, and I was
Yep.
experimenting in these Faraday cages, which basically eliminate all radiation. So I was trying that, but
Mm.
it got really bad because it turns out I had contact dermatitis with the silver in
Oh,
the
wow.
EMF
Yeah. Yeah.
shielding. So that
Just
just
made it
set me
worse.
off, and I was
Gosh.
like, no, do that.
And I think that just goes to show the lengths that you were having to go to
Yeah.
try and get answers. What was, and I think there's people that seek out naturopaths, homeopathy, and so on. I think in my experience, when I talk to these kind of patients, because the work that I do, I end up seeing a lot of these kind of patients as well, and they usually say that the reason they go to these alternative practitioners is because they're desperate, because the
Yeah,
standard
basically.
conventional medical system has basically said, sorry, we can't help you, go off and just be miserable, basically.
Yeah.
Was that kind of your experience? What were the doctors kind of saying was your
Well,
projection, your kind of outcome likely to be with this eczema?
yeah, well, most of my life they just had the steroids, but recently, obviously, they have Dupixent now. So all the doctors were saying to me, I was when I went to hospital last year, that was the last time I went to hospital around April. They said to me, you don't. I was thinking about moving to Brisbane because I love the
Mm.
humidity. I actually have a humidifier in my room for that very reason. So there's a lot of things I'm doing. And it basically said, you don't have to move to Brisbane. You just go on Dupixent. Like, you're a pianist. You should be able to play the piano. Take Dupixent. You'll be able to eat whatever you like, and everything will be fine. And that concerned me because, firstly, everyone was always talking to me saying, why are you so like averse to trying Dupixent?
Mm.
First of all, I didn't like the fact that you have conjunctivitis in the eyes. Like, some cases are so extreme that they literally get cataracts and corneal damage. Other people are gaining weight. They go out into the sun and they notice they burn
Mm.
more easily. There's all these problems, and some people even talk about liver damage and organ damage. And the way I was researching it and looking up Paul Saladino and all of these alternative health practitioners, they were constantly saying, talk about the root cause, like what's happening inside your
Mm.
gut. What are you eating? You're literally expressing all of these toxins through your skin. Like, with the steroids, it's suppressing it. And then when you suppress it, like some of these people were talking about, then it manifests deeper, like into asthma or then in allergies. And so I had all three when I was growing up. I had asthma, allergies, eczema. And so, like, that's it's just like some people talk about when you're driving, it's like you see the petrol sign lighting up, and instead of actually filling the tank with more petrol, you just put a steroid as a metaphor, like just some sticky tape,
Stick 'em
and
over
cover
it.
it, and then everything's fine. You
Yeah.
know, so like, I just think that if my body is releasing all these toxins out in my skin, that's its pathway. That's trying to release the toxins from my
Mm.
body. It's probably, I just, from the research I was doing, and it's not my opinion, these are the thoughts of these, like, I think Paul Saladino and Sean Baker talks about this. It's like you're blocking the pathway of the expression of of the toxins in your body, and so you want to be able to release that. Um, and the word, like, I have friends who are on methotrexate right now for
Mm.
arthritis, and they look really inflamed, and it really concerns me. He says things like, if I how like he asked the question to the doctor, how long am I going to be on this? And so, well, until you improve. And so it kind of just sounds like, to me, you're going to be on this for the rest of your
Mm.
life, and I don't want to be taking 2 injections per month, 24 per year, and 440 whatever in 20 years. It's like,
Yeah.
I'd
It's
rather heal it
absolutely,
holistically.
it's certainly a lot, and some of these medications, Dupixent is a monoclonal antibody, methotrexate. These are very heavy duty medications. These are not kind of yeah,
Yeah,
just take some ibuprofen or paracetamol. These are very heavy duty medications. Real serious
yeah,
side effects, and yeah, a lot of people end up on these for a very long time, if not the rest of their life. They try and come off them, and they really struggle.
that's right.
What did the doctors then tell you? What did the dermatologist say when you were declining the Dupixent? Then what was their
Yeah,
take on that then?
yeah. Well, they of course, like, I didn't want to sound crazy to them, so I was just trying to justify it. Like, look, I go on these online, like, online, but so immediately they shut it
Yep.
down. But, like, there's these forums that I go on where every single, like, there's so many Australians there that have eczema. It's called a Dupixent page, and they literally report their symptoms. And it's for me, looking at it, it's like 50-50. Some of them say, "Yeah, it's perfect, miracle drug. I'm so happy on this." Other people say, "Oh, my eye is covered in pus and I can't see properly now. And I would have rather just have the eczema than this." And it's really, the opportunity cost is, it's hard to choose between the two. And
Mm,
I was instantly swayed against it.
mm. Did they ever talk to you
Um,
about your diet as a potential cause for
no,
your eczema?
never.
Really, never.
I mean, no, never. I mean, like, even Sean Baker, like, talks about the diet to his clients, his patients, and he gets his license revoked.
Mm,
Um, from the story I remember from these Joe Rogan
yeah, I think he's
podcasts,
had issues in the
like,
past. Yeah,
they questioned him and threw him out.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so I understand, even if there are doctors like yourself out there that are willing to help and want to. It's like, it's not just going against the grain. Like they might attack you and remove your license, and it's just
It
messy.
certainly can happen. I mean, there was a case, some people may know it, Dr. Gary Fettke. He was an orthopedic surgeon that was advising his patients on low carb diets. Yeah, basically, I mean, long story short, he was suspended for, I think, about 2.5 years for giving
Wow.
dietary advice as an orthopedic specialist. And basically, Dietetics Australia, I think, were the ones that, if I recall, weren't happy with it. They dobbed him in, so to speak, and then APRA, the regulatory body for doctors, then got involved and suspended him under great pressure. And then eventually reversed it and reinstated him and said it's all fine. Thankfully, since then that's paved the way for other doctors to start to talk a bit more about our diet and how it, we can help people with our health, which is insane that it took that
Mm,
level to kind of allow people a bit more freedom to actually discuss diet. It's something as a GP, like, I mean, I do like 20 times a day, and
mm,
but technically I'm not actually allowed to do it. It's crazy laws,
mm,
here in Australia, medical like practice laws. It's just ridiculous, but we're kind of
mm.
allowed to do it now. Um, did they ever mention anything like dairy or anything in the diet? Because that's a fairly common one that we would talk to people about, is maybe some triggers. Did they ever mention that at all?
Well, I've been to a fair few dermatologists around the years, like at least 10 to 20. And I remember when I was in high school, like I went up to one of my dermatologists and I asked him, like, when I eat McDonald's, my eczema flares up. Do you think McDonald's is bad for me? And he said, no, there's not really any correlation between food and eczema. I think, spicy foods, it might be bad because it
Wow.
actually inflames your skin. But apart from, I don't see any reason to believe that you eating McDonald's would cause any flare ups. And I'm like, what about pools, the chlorine? When I dive into the chlorine water, I feel like it irritates my skin. There's no evidence of that. So since I was like 13, I honestly never heard any doctor recommend anything to do with diet.
That kind of just blows my mind, really, because I mean, it's one of the first things that I bring up with people when I see eczema is, okay, what are you eating?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just crazy. And even then, you were telling them, okay, this is my experience. They were
That's
basically
right.
telling you, well, no, it's not.
Yeah, that's
Pretty
exactly right.
much.
Like they would think like, there's no evidence of that, so obviously you're just conflating the two
Yeah.
and you're wrong.
Yeah. It's a story we,
Yeah.
we do hear quite often, unfortunately. What do they say then when, did you tell them that you were doing this carnivore diet? Like, do they know
Well,
now?
I think I said it before. I went back. I'm not sure if I said it actually. I went back to a doctor that I've been seeing in Monash Medical Center. I was visiting the doctor, and basically I went up to him and said, "Look at my skin. Look how good it looks." And he said, "That's pretty amazing. What are you using?" And then I pulled out Paul Saladino's book, The Carnivore
Yeah.
Code, and I said, "This is what I've been following." And he said, "Well, there's no evidence for this, and if you really think it's helping you, I can still see that there is still some marks on your body, so it's not completely
Right.
healed. You could still use Dupixent, and you might be conflating the two. And some doctors that I talked to even went as far as to say it could be placebo, that you just think that it's healing you. It's not."
Does it matter? If
Yeah.
it's healing you, it's healing you. Does it really matter if it's placebo? I mean,
I don't think it all. To me, it matters. I think because I've tried 20 years
yeah,
worth of like of drugs, not experimental, but actual drugs that they've recommended to
yeah,
me, and each time I've gone in with the mindset that this might cure me, and so I went into the same mindset with the carnivore. So I don't think that, like, just for my own mindset, I don't think it would have been a placebo if
mm,
I went in every single time thinking it would work and the placebo could have worked each of those
yep,
times. Why would it suddenly start working now for the placebo? Oh, for the carnivore.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know it's not placebo. I mean, I work with a lot of patients with
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
of
yeah,
course, but it's interesting. They were still kind of trying to almost push that onto you, like they just kind of
yeah.
couldn't accept that maybe you'd managed to actually cure yourself without their help, which is interesting. We do sometimes see that, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
all of this must have taken a pretty big toll on your mental health. Was that ever affected with all of this?
Yeah, it was a really long journey. I was reading survival books. I was reading books of Edward Shackleton, who journeyed into the Antarctic and was lost for 2 years and sailing the cold waters. And all of them have frostbite on their feet, and they're trying to find their way back to shore, but they can't. These are the things that were keeping me buoyant mentally. I was reading people going up to Mount Everest and just survival stories, and I said, this is my own kind of war, and it got dark.
Wow.
But I couldn't allow myself to give up hope, because I knew if I lost my sense of grip with the world, then it's so correlated. Like, if you feel stressed, my eczema would just exacerbate. So if I lose my sense of hope to live, how much would it accelerate
Mm,
downhill? I said, I have to. The thing is, though, like, I've said this in other podcasts, I've got this delusional quality about me where I really think there's an answer, even if there isn't. You know, and I just couldn't believe that there was not an answer. I said, this is not my life. I didn't like I didn't sign up's wrong, not the wrong word, but I'm not going to live this life
mm,
where I'm just pinned to my
mm.
bed for the rest of my life. And if 99% of doctors are going to tell me that there is no cure, I just don't believe it. I'm going to try to find
Find that
something.
1%.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I went everywhere. Like, I was cold water therapy, sauna. I
Wow.
was trying the EMF shielding. I was trying the humidifiers, and then finally I found the carnivore diet. So that's why you were asking
Mm,
before. What was your mindset like when he asked you to do the carnivore diet? Like, so I was really open to
yeah.
everything. Like, I was trying everything, Chinese herbs,
Mm,
anything. And I was trying it at least 30 days. So I was willing to try it, and I always would give it heavy research as well. I would never just go into it blindly. Like, I was always doing, what's this going to do to me?
No, absolutely. I mean, everyone that I talk to about it, I tell them, look, do your own research. Here's some studies you can look at. Here's some papers and so forth. Here's the principles of it, but go and do your own research. If you want to talk more, come back and see me. I never push it on anyone. What has the anyone else kind of said to you, like friends, family, like your parents, now that they see your skin? What are they saying
Mm.
about it and the carnivore diet?
Well, my dad was actually like to me, "What a miracle! Like, I didn't believe you would cure it. Like, we had the best intentions for you our whole lives. Like, I was trying to help you, and I thought I could help you by getting these humidifiers and by putting you on these creams and taking you every day to these UV treatment centers. But really, in 7 weeks, you cured yourself by taking it into your own hands and just eating meat. Like, what a miracle! Who knew it was just meat?" So yeah, that was my dad's reaction. I
Mm.
mean, there's a whole mix of different reactions. Like, the placebo reaction was from a few of my friends as well who's studying medicine. They're like,
Oh yeah.
not anywhere in my literature does it say, like, he's like, this is my field. I'm like, I'm not saying it's not your field. Like, but like, he's like, there's nothing that says that diet would affect your skin like that. So I'm pretty sure it's you conflating the two, and it's placebo. Um, those are pretty much the standard reactions.
Yeah.
But most people are supportive. They're like, "Wow, look at you. Obviously, it's healed you, and we can't deny that. What a miracle!" And their eyes have been opened to
Mm.
the amazing power of the carnivore diet.
I think certainly more people are becoming open to the idea that diet can make a difference in their lives. And whether you kind of go carnivore or vegan, I mean, obviously we know where we sit on that, but I think everybody's
Mm,
just a lot of people are sick of being sick, and
that's
they're
right.
trying to find another way. That's why people explore their diet. Did you ever think about going vegan to see if that helped you at all?
I tried for a week, but this was before I had extreme eczema. Like, I was trying veganism for, like, I wanted to do it more than a week, but I just couldn't last longer than a week because I was already allergic
Yeah.
to beans, legumes, nuts. So a lot of the protein supplements I couldn't already
Mm.
have, and after a week I just got really sick and I just couldn't do it. I forget the book I was reading, but it was a study that I was reading of the benefits of vegan diets, and so I wanted to give it a shot. But yeah, I just couldn't last on it.
Yeah, I think I've lasted maybe like a day on a plant based diet before. It's just it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's not for me, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to, see if you'd done that. You've been on this now
Yeah.
for what, like 7 months, I think you said?
7 months, yeah. Before you go on, my sister actually went on the vegan diet quite a long time, and she ended up returning to a carnivore ancestral diet. She calls it. Like, she eats quite a lot
Okay.
of food, but like the focus is meat and cheese, and so that's why she calls it ancestral.
Mm.
And she said, I've never been more sick than I was on a vegan diet.
Interesting.
So it's kind of there's a discussion to be had on why is there so much propaganda is the wrong word, but like, why is there so much dissemination
Mm.
of vegan diets everywhere you look, and hardly anything, and actually not just anything, but rebuke and vilification of the carnivore diet? Like,
Yep.
who knows?
It's fascinating. I mean, red meat and saturated fat, it's so demonized,
Yeah,
grossly unfairly. And I put a picture out on Instagram the other day. I don't think I've ever met a single patient that I suggested eating more red meat, and then they came back and said it didn't work. They all just feel
mm,
better eating more red meat, and it's
wow,
almost linear. The more they eat, the better they feel. And
yeah,
it's totally just demonized and vilified. And I mean, this goes back to 1960s Ansel Keys and cholesterol and so forth.
Ansel
But
Keys, exactly.
and the Sugar Research Foundation and all that stuff. And
Yeah,
I'm covering that in another episode later on cholesterol. I won't bore the listeners with all of that
yeah.
story. But
There
it's
was-
yeah, it's
mm,
been a long time just demonized. And it's fascinating because if you look at the charts, the graphs of consumption of food, compared to chronic disease, red meat is going down. Consumption of red meat is going down.
mm,
Consumption of saturated
yeah,
fat is going down. Consumption of seed oils is going up. Consumption of sugar is
yeah,
going up. And what are the chronic diseases doing? They're
yeah.
they're all
It's going
going up.
up.
They're all skyrocketing.
Autoimmune diseases going up at the rate of
Yeah,
3 to 9% per
all
year.
going up. Mental health getting worse. Cancer getting
Hmm.
worse. Dementia getting worse. I mean, 50, 60 years ago, the idea of going into a nursing home was pretty alien to most people, and now it's just standard. You know,
Mm.
and yet we're doing the things that they tell us to do. We're on the whole, the evidence shows people are following the nutritional advice, yet
Yeah.
everything's getting worse. it,
Mm.
it it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, well, hang on, do we have it the wrong way around?
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people like us are looking at and saying, yeah, maybe we do. Let's explore. And then we're finding that
Yeah.
that benefit. Um, where do you plan on
Yeah.
going from here? Because you've been doing it now for 7 months. Do you plan on just carrying it on now? Are you going to stop, or what's your journey looking like now, do you think?
Well, I've been trying to reintroduce some foods, and so every time I do, there's always reactions, which are unfortunate. Like, sometimes, like, I have a food journal, so every time I reintroduce a new food, if it has a terrible reaction, I just avoid that indefinitely. But I'm at the moment, I'm trying to find a palette of food that I can eat without having severe reactions. That is not just meat. So my main thing, I'm going to stick with meat mainly, but I'm going to try to aim for a more carnivore, ancestral kind of diet. So cheese and dairy really disagrees with me, but I'm starting to reintroduce things like a bit of apples, avocado, coconut, sashimi.
Mm,
Those are my additions now. But apart from that, it's still testing.
mm,
I'm still testing. Like, I'm in the testing phase now. Just on a point you said before, like, talking about Ansel Keys, and there's like another author, I forget the author's name, but he was a doctor, and he wrote a book called The Clot Thickens, and he was I think, I'm not sure where he was
not
from,
sure.
but he was basically cancelled, if you will. Like, he got his license revoked, and he tried his best to, like, sue and push back against the systems that kind of suppress him. But it's just, there is an active vilification of this carnivore diet,
Mm,
and an active um, praising and dissemination of the vegan diet. So it's like, what's going on? Is there? I don't know what. Like, it's quickly, like, people could just
yeah.
push this into the realm of conspiracy very quickly. But like, what's going on? Do they want us to be sick? Like, or if you look at the World Economic Forum and you look at Sean Baker's post about how they want us to sex or something, it's like, what's going
Who
on?
knows? I mean, you certainly can start to wonder these things, and then of course everyone will
Yeah,
tell you, well, you're just a conspiracy theorist and you're a
that's right.
wacko, and no, there's
Yeah,
no big plot out, to get people and so on. And I mean,
yeah,
I don't necessarily think that they're all out to get us, and there's a big
yeah.
conspiracy. I think it's just probably they just don't know. Yeah,
Misinformation.
they just don't know.
Yeah,
The powers that be probably think it's in the best interest of people. I don't necessarily think that they're out to suppress the population and so forth. I know some people do.
yeah.
But then you look at,
Well, there's actually, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Sorry, I was just going to say there was these clinical studies that Dr. Paul Mason in Australia was talking
mm,
about, like that were done in like the '60s, which proved that sugar
oh, yeah,
is so much worse for
mm,
you than cholesterol. And he was talking
100%.
about like LDL and how it's sugar that oxidizes the LDL, which causes atherosclerosis, not the cholesterol LDL
Correct.
itself. And so all of these studies weren't
Yeah.
released until recently. It's seemingly all coming out now.
Yes.
And he was talking about, why is it coming out now and not before? Well, the reason was, according to the study, is the people who funded the study didn't like
Didn't like the outcome.
the answers.
Absolutely.
They didn't like the outcome, and so they just
Yeah.
stopped the
No,
study.
so I think you're referring to probably
That's
either the Sydney heart trial or the Minnesota heart
that
trial
one,
or
yeah.
whatever it's called. Yeah, these two kind
Mm,
of big studies that were done a long time ago that basically pretty much almost proved that LDL was not the cause of heart disease, and they were
yeah.
basically just buried. I mean, I think I'm not sure which one it was. One of them was almost quite literally buried in the ground. It was like locked in some storeroom with unmarked kind of box or something, and yeah,
Mm,
and then it came out, and the authors said, well, yeah, we just didn't like the outcome, so
yeah.
we just didn't publish it. And it's just
Yeah.
like that's just the worst thing you can do as a scientist is just do the study and just never publish it, because they're people that
Yeah.
paid for it. They didn't like those answers.
Yeah.
And certainly, I mean, if you look at the the guidelines that's produced, people like the American Heart Association, diabetes associations across the world, and so on. If you look at their sponsors, who are paying for these companies, these guidelines, and so on, it's typically pharmacological companies, drug companies, and sugar
Mm,
companies,
mm.
and who
Sugar
stands
companies,
to benefit
definitely.
from basically demonizing red meat, demonizing saturated fat and cholesterol is drug
Mm,
companies and sugar companies.
that's right.
And you start to wonder when you look at these things, like you said, the Sydney heart trial, the Minnesota trial. Why were these buried? Now there's lots more evidence coming out that LDL cholesterol maybe isn't as bad as we were led to believe. In fact, 2015, the big study in BMJ, I think it was 68,000 odd patients, big systematic review. 60 plus year old patients showed it was protective. LDL was protective against heart
Mm,
disease and all cause mortality. There's more
that's
and
right.
more of these studies coming out. Um, and really, I mean, you go back to things like the American Heart Association. I think it was 2018, I believe. They stopped listing saturated fat as a cause for concern in the guidelines. I mean,
Mm,
that's probably the biggest paradigm shift we've had in like 60 years, and yet
yeah.
they didn't tell anyone.
Yeah,
Just
isn't it
just just
interesting?
just
The
quiet.
media is silent.
This is like the
Yeah.
biggest thing since sliced bread, and they just
Yeah.
no mention of it at all. And it makes you wonder, why wasn't this screamed from the rooftops? Like
Yeah.
this is
It is so
such a
reassuring,
huge
though.
thing.
It is so reassuring to see this wave of truth really coming out in the medical literature, and all of this facts about the carnivore diet and how good it is starting to be shared with the
It
world.
is absolutely. I mean, look, we don't have long term data for carnivore, and so I make that very clear to all my patients that we don't have that long term data. But there's not a lot of long term data for other diets either. There's maybe some
Mm,
studies on things like heart disease specifically, maybe cancer specifically, and so on. But there's not that much studies long term, because nutritional science, you can't just do long term studies on people. You can't get ethics approval. You can't do randomized control trials. You certainly can't double blind them or anything like that. It's all just observational studies, self-reported, and so on. But I think we live in a pretty exciting time where there's like you said, there's a big groundswell of just people wanting the truth, people
Yeah.
wanting to not be sick anymore, and people starting to question
Mm.
this advice that they're given and saying, "No, I'm not sure that's working.
Yeah.
What's actually going on here?"
It's usually those who are really sick already, who like Michaela Peterson or myself,
Mm,
or those who really try these carnivore diets, because, or I mean, a lot of bodybuilders as well, but it's those who are sick who have nothing to
mm,
lose, because if someone is in the prime of your health, why would you want to change? And especially going onto this
that's
carnivore
right.
diet that seems ludicrous of just eating
Mm,
meat, surely that's not good for you. And I would have been exactly the
yep.
same, I would have been exactly in that boat. But it literally takes, in my case, I was at the brink of death. And so, like last year around April, I would have, like, according to the doctor, I would have died anyway if I not come into the hospital and taken steroids and antibiotics. And so,
Mm.
if I continued along that train, I would have continued to be heavily sick. And so, yes, there's no long term studies on the carnivore diet, but I'm already much more healthier than I was. And from how I feel, and I assume, but I'm pretty sure I will last much longer than I did before.
And that I think is a great point. I know Dr. Sean Baker asks a lot of people on his podcast, and I'll ask you the same. Theoretically, okay, people will tell you, okay, it might increase your risk of heart disease. Would you rather have the slightly increased risk of heart disease, or and be free of your life-threatening, debilitating eczema, or would
Mm,
you rather have the eczema and say, well, at least I won't have a heart attack?
yeah. Well, I with as a choice, like I'd obviously choose a slight increase in heart disease, but considering the studies that of Paul Mason and
Mm,
all of these doctors, of the one you just talked about before, like there's not really a sign that the higher LDL levels actually increase
correct.
risk of atherosclerosis. So even then, I'm not
Yeah.
concerned.
What have your blood tests? You mentioned before when we were talking, your blood tests a little bit. What's your blood tests looking like? Things like your cholesterol and so
Yeah.
on.
Let me quickly put on my glasses and I'll have a look. I've got them here. Um, so basically, my blood test. Would you like to share the screen? And
I'm not sure if I
actually,
can on this
this is probably
Zencaster, but
okay. Don't worry. Probably not the best idea of putting my private
maybe not.
information
Just
online on
general
here.
general advice might be
Yeah, but my general
general numbers.
total cholesterol was 6.9 millimole
Yeah.
per liter. My triglycerides 0.6
Hmm.
millimole. So they said if it's anywhere above like if it's below 0.5, it was good according to Dr. Paul Mason. So mine's slightly above, but it's the ratio he talks
Yeah.
about of triglycerides to HDL. It has to be lower than 1, which mine is. Mine is about 0.333, so that's why I'm not really
Yeah. Well,
concerned.
that's amazing.
I didn't find any doctors to do this for me. That's why I have to do this for myself. I
Yeah.
gotta research it. So yeah, so my triglycerides are 0.6. My HDL levels are like 1.8 millimole per
Mm,
liter. My LDL levels is 4.8, and then it says non-HDL is
mm,
5.1. So the bold ones are total cholesterol, HDL, sorry,
mm.
LDL. So, but the other one that concerned me was the AST and
Yeah.
ALT, which came out to be 72
Mm.
um, U per liter. Forgive my
No,
ignorance
no,
here.
that's all right. Yeah.
30, and then AST was 36 U per
Yeah.
liter. I'm not sure what
So
U is.
ASTs, I mean, basically normal now, and ALTs are a little bit up, but not too much. But like I said, I mean, the triglycerides. I mean, I was learning back in medical school, triglycerides were really the cause of heart disease and atherosclerosis, and then now of course it's all about LDL. But yeah, that HDL to triglyceride ratio is incredibly important. And for anyone that doesn't know, I mean,
Mm,
Dr. Paul Mason, you've mentioned him a few times. Fantastic guy.
mm,
You've done amazing work, brilliant YouTube videos. Definitely go and check out his work there.
mm,
We're talking about there the risk of oxidized LDL, damaged LDL, which we know is a risk factor for heart disease. And the lower the ratio there of the triglyceride to HDL, the less risk this is, basically.
mm,
Um,
mm.
Have you noticed any other improvements through doing the carnivore diet? Because you mentioned, of course, you're a teacher, you're a music teacher and a maths teacher. Did you say?
As math teacher, yeah.
Have you noticed any difference in like your academic performance or your cognitive
Yeah, I'd
abilities at
say
all?
so. When I'm rehearsing with my friends, I can last a really long time in the same cognitive state that I start with. So, and I know Jordan Peterson talks about this as well. So, by the time we're at the end of the rehearsal, most of them are like, "Oh, I need to have a coffee. Let's call it a day." And I'm just like, "Oh, really? Already?" So I know that, like on the carnivore diet, like intellectually, you're just so switched on.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I
Yeah, there's no peaks. It's just like this
it's just
constant
yeah.
baseline of
That's it.
energy.
And how are you finding, working out and exercising on the carnivore diet? Because some people out there say, oh, you need loads of carbs and stuff. You can't build muscle on carnivore, etc. I mean, what's your experience there of actually exercising and working out?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'd have to like, I'm kind of like, as a metaphor, a frog in boiling water, for instance, because like I'd have to compare it with how I was before. And from what I remember, I mean, I can't really say there's a huge increase in motivation to work out because usually, unfortunately, I work out every time I'm itchy, which having eczema was very frequently before. So I always worked out when I was itchy. And even now that my eczema is basically gone virtually. Like, I mean, there's a small amount here, and that's because I've been reintroducing
Mm,
foods. As soon as I stick to the carnivore diet, it will completely disappear. So, uh, I'm working out whenever I'm itchy. So even though I'm healed, there's still a sense of, from people tell me online, it's like you might have not nerve damage, but because your nerves were constantly under attack or constantly sensitive to the pain that you've been experiencing for 3 years, it might continue for a bit, like ghost pain, just like when you cut off someone's leg,
mm,
they still feel their leg there. So I still get these pinpricks of pain every now and then. And so, which is, I say every now and then, it's actually quite often during the week. So even though I'm healed, it's still a non-linear journey, which is indefinite. Because the moment I stop eating carnivore, then it's probably going to come back. But so I'm working out every time I'm in pain or I'm hurting, and it's itchy. So in terms of, have I noticed, is it better now that I'm on carnivore? It's hard to say because I usually work out when I'm itchy.
mm. Yeah, no, but you haven't seen any negative effects of
I haven't
being on
seen any
carnivore.
negative effects. To be honest, there was a time where I felt a little fatigued, and people online were saying, the food you're eating on carnivore, like you're always getting rump steak, which is basically not much fat at all. The amount of fat to protein ratio that you're eating is probably not enough fat. So I found possibly I was fatigued because I wasn't having enough fat. So I've been increasing the amount of
Hmm.
fat intake in my diet. I've been having more um, what do you call it, lamb chops and just more T-bone steaks and ribeyes, except they're more expensive, obviously.
They
So
they are,
I've been
yeah.
trying to up my fat intake, and I've found my fatigue levels
Yeah.
have dissipated.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that
Yeah,
definitely can be an issue. I think lack of fat. I think because a lot of people they're used to just eating low fat, even in the back of
that's
their
right.
minds. If they're not even trying to be low fat. And I used to do it. I remember telling my mum, to pour the grease off the bacon. Pour the fat out of the mince. Just you shouldn't be eating it. It's bad for you. Back
Mm,
back in the day. And I think a lot of people do that just naturally anyway because it's so
programmed
so
into us,
ingrained, yeah.
counterintuitive. Yeah,
And I think people aren't used to eating that much fat
that's right.
cognitively, so
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean certainly things like ribeyes and so on, yeah, look, they're pretty pretty expensive here in Australia. We're lucky, I think most of our meat is of good quality, but yeah, it can be pretty expensive, that's for sure. We're running out of time a little bit here. I just wondered if you had any. It's been amazing to talk to you, Bradley, and I appreciate you
Oh,
sharing your
it's
story
been
so
amazing.
much. It's an absolutely amazing story, and definitely anyone that's listening or watching, on YouTube, definitely should go and check out Bradley's Instagram. I'll put the link in the description. The pictures, of his eczema and so on. I mean, it's truly amazing the difference it's really made for him. Do you have any tips or kind of advice for anyone that's maybe struggling with their eczema, or interested perhaps in looking for alternative therapies, or trying the carnivore diet? Would you have any advice for anyone?
I'd have to say, keep your mind like open to the idea of the carnivore diet. It's very easy to be skeptical and to just switch off and say, this is fad diet, so I'm not going to try this. Or it's very easy to just have complete blind faith in the medical system and doctors, and which I had for 20 years. And so sometimes it's unfortunate because it gets to the point where, I mean, some doctors discredit topical steroid withdrawal, which is what happens when you basically become addicted to steroids, and you're no longer, like, you've reached the highest potency, and your body can no longer, your body is forced into withdrawal because it's so addicted to it. And it's like heroin. When
Mm.
people take heroin, you can't get the hit anymore, and so you need a higher dose, a higher dose, a higher dose, a higher dose, and then finally you've got to the highest. It no longer works anymore. And so that they call topical steroid withdrawal, it usually gets to the point where you have to reach that point before people start questioning medicine and their doctors and the mainstream of medicine that they give you. And it shouldn't be that way. You should, I guess, if only people were willing to just try diet earlier on, possibly you could avoid these huge illnesses, possibly even cancer. Sean Baker was interviewing this a beautiful Asian lady who just recently cured herself of cancer purely because she went on the carnivore diet. And so probably she wouldn't even have to go there had she introduced a carnivore diet earlier on.
Possibly,
You
yeah. I
see?
mean, if APRA is listening, we can't say that carnivore is a cure for cancer. We can't say that. But
Yeah.
it goes to what we call the metabolic mitochondrial theory of cancer, and the idea there that really cancer cells just feed on primarily glucose, and without the glucose, without the sugar, that theoretically then you can starve them and kill them off, and theoretically, the most perfect chemotherapy we can have. But yeah, we can't officially say that carnivore is a cure
Yeah,
for
for
cancer.
sure. Yeah.
I'll get my
None of this
license
is medical
revoked.
advice.
Not medical advice; it's generic in nature. Insert
Yeah.
disclaimers.
But basically, I'd love to, just like if you're out there and you have an illness, like, or even if you're not, even if you don't have an illness and you're in your 20s, like, it's great to set a routine now when you're young, or if you're not young, like you're not in your 20s and you're like 30 above and you're finding yourself, even you don't have an illness, perhaps just try, the best thing you can do for yourself is like exercise and diet. Those two before, like, as it's so easy if you're choosing quick fix pill versus change your lifestyle. Everyone goes for the quick fix
It's
pill.
easier.
Yeah, you need to set up the right routines early on. Lifestyle, exercise. Like, I've got this routine where I go in the sauna in the morning, then go into the ocean, regardless of whether it's summer or winter, and then carnivore diet and exercise every
Mm.
day, no breaks. And so that's what's keeping me alive. And if people had a routine like that, they wouldn't even need to go to the doctor.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would love to be out of a job. If I'm out of a job, I've done my job, and
I better not
and and,
suggest that
and
then.
move on. There will always be more patients. There will always be people get sick. So,
That's
but
right.
yeah, genuinely, like if I ever get out of a job because everyone's cured, I mean, I'm a very happy man. But no, I think that's just great advice, and I'd say same thing to people is just try it,
That's
and
right.
just see how you feel. If you don't agree with it, great, fine, doesn't work, no problem. If it does,
Mm,
amazing, roll with it and go and see someone who's carnivore friendly and can have that conversation with you and work out the best thing with you, basically. So
that's right.
um
And 30 days is not going to hurt you. Like, if you just try it for 30 days,
absolutely. I mean, I
it's not
I,
going
I
to.
usually tell
Yeah,
people 2 weeks because 2 weeks is a little bit more palatable, and
that's right.
most people in my experience get benefit in 2 weeks, and then they're not necessarily cured of whatever their issues are, but they're improving. And so
Yeah.
they then can see, okay, yes, I can see where this is going. I'm happy to kind of carry on for those 30 days or 60 days. If you come out and say, right, you've just got to eat meat for 30 days, yeah, some people aren't necessarily on board with that. Some people,
Yeah.
they're just like, right, where's my steak? They just dive right in. They can't wait.
That was me. I was like 30 days
Yeah.
in. Now I'm 7 months
I
in,
was just
never
like,
looking
right, I'm just
back.
going to eat meat. Yeah, fantastic. I'm down for this.
Yeah,
But yeah, some people are a little bit more hesitant, and you got to maybe ease those
that's
in
right.
a little bit more. But how can people
Yeah.
find you on social and just kind of catch up with
Yeah.
what you're
So
doing?
best place to reach me is Instagram because I'm always posting there. It's my go-to. It's at Bradley Marshall Official. So what I post there is because I mainly used Instagram before as a musician and promoting my music. That was my music page before, but now I'm sharing my story. I kept it secret for so long, and only recently, now that it's cured, I felt like the world needs to know this. So I kept all of it hidden. I was covering up my eczema. People were even commenting, "I don't think he even has eczema. None of these photos he had eczema. He didn't have eczema before." I mean, I didn't promote that. I was insecure about it. Like, long story short, like when I went on antibiotics and prednisolone, like it would heal my skin up for like 2 week periods, and I would film enough content to last me 6 months, giving the illusion that I was healthy. So that's the lengths I
Gosh,
went
yeah.
to prove to people that my skin was fine, because obviously the close up of my fingers playing the piano. So
Mm,
yeah, you'll see it as a music page before, but now it's like focusing on health,
yeah,
and so that's my primary page of
yeah.
where you can find
Yeah,
me.
no, absolutely. Well, look, obviously, send me. I've got some of your links already. I'll put them in the description below. But anyone that's listening, anyone that's watching, go follow at Bradley Marshall Official on Instagram. Check out his amazing carnivore success story, healing his, curing his, pretty much almost incurable eczema, and living a life free of this debilitating condition that he had. Thank you so much, Bradley, for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you so much for having
Very,
me.
very welcome. And yeah, take care of yourself and keep going. And yeah, we might get you back on the show at some point down the line and see how we're still going.
Yeah, see the progress.
Absolutely. Take care. Thanks a lot, Bradley.
Right,
No
take
worries.
care.
Bye
See
now.
ya.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Meat Medic podcast. If you found this podcast useful, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and let's get the word out there about the carnivore community and how it can help. Follow me on social media at Dr. Suresh Khirwadkar, Instagram, at Dr. Suresh Khirwadkar on Facebook, and at Khirwadkar on Twitter. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.